Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome back. In fact, welcome to my studio. As you can see, just like you, right now I'm having to do all of my work from home. So usually you've been with me in my kitchen, but today because we're going to work on our voices, I invited you into the studio where I do all of my voiceover recordings and my audio drama production and those kinds of things. So you're getting a chance to kind of see behind the scenes. You can see my very fancy sort of microphone here right now. Don't worry, you're not going to need one of these. I'm just using it so that the recording's a little clearer for you there at home. But today we're finally going to talk about using our voices. Now, over the last few weeks, we've talked about using all of our various different tools in order to create characters and act, right? Because we're talking about acting. Today, we're going to talk about using that all-important voice tool, and that's going to be super important in the weeks to come as we begin to talk more and more about audio drama. But before we start, let's go ahead and do one of our warm-ups. Let's do our sensory warm-up today to get ourselves into that creative state of mind. Now today, we're going to do another sensory inventory, very similar to what we did last week. But last week, if you'll remember, we used our sense of sight. We looked around the room to try and find all of the things that we could that were the same color. This week, we're going to use our hearing sense. So what I want you to do now is we're going to take the next 30 seconds, and over the next 30 seconds, I want you to just close your eyes and listen to your environment and try and determine how many different types of sounds you can hear over the course of that time. Are you ready now? Don't make any noise. Don't try and think too hard about anything. We're just listening. So start listening now. So how did you do? Did you hear lots of different sounds? Or did you have one particular sound that kind of took over and made it so you couldn't hear anything else? I have my computer sitting here next to me, and the fan is sort of very loud. And so that was something that caught me, so that I spent a lot of time kind of listening to that sound and the different types of sounds that it makes. But using those senses, again, helps us get into that creative frame of mind. So are you ready to continue? Good. I'm glad. Now, before we get started recording our voices or creating our characters, the first thing we want to talk about is how to use our voices speaking for on stage or for recording or anything like that. And there's two different sorts of things that I want to talk about. The first one is what we call diction. And diction is how we pronounce our words or how we say our words with accuracy and clarity. When we record our voices or when we speak on stage or for film or anything like that, it's very important that our audience is able to hear and understand us. And diction helps with the understanding part. And that's why we do a lot of those vocal warm-ups like we did in week 1, if you can remember those. Let's do some of those now. Do you remember the rotten button on the cotton mitten made me lose it? Or how about he usually urges an umbrella upon us? Remember, it's important to stretch those face muscles out and get that tongue moving so that we're prepared to do the work of speaking clearly. And the second is projection. And again, if you'll remember back to that first week, we talked about our diaphragm, that little muscle that helps our lungs do their work. And that also, using that as what we call a support for our breath, helps us push the sound out of our mouths and helps us get more air out so that more air is coming out so that our audience can hear us, even sometimes without a microphone, in the case of live theater. and it allows them to hear the message that we're trying to get out, which is what that's all important about. Now, remember, we don't want to, when we speak loudly, we don't want to speak from our throats. If we use our throats too much when we're trying to speak loudly, we'll actually damage our voices, and we don't want to do that. So remember, whenever we talk about speaking loudly, it's always coming from down here. We're always pushing the air out with that diaphragm, never yelling up here in our throat. Now, we use our throat a little bit as we create our character voices. Don't worry about that. We'll definitely get to that. But we always want to use it in such a way that we're not hurting ourselves. And to that point, if at any point you start to feel hoarse or you start to feel something funny in your throat or it gets sore or anything like that, stop what you're doing, get some water, drink some water, and make a change so you're not doing something that's so stressful for your voice. Your voice is one of your most important tools in life, as well as in acting, certainly. And I want you to preserve that. Good. Now, next thing we have to do is we have to start thinking about our character voices, about the kinds of voices that characters make. The first way that I like to start thinking about a character voice is by looking at the character. Now, if I'm acting for stage, I don't always have the opportunity to see what the character looks like. Sometimes I just have to envision it in my mind. But sometimes when I'm doing the types of voiceover work and things like that that I do, I actually do have the opportunity to see a picture of the character that I'm going to create. And sometimes just that image helps me to create the voice that I'm going to use. So let's take a look at a few characters. I think you probably know these characters. And let's see if you can, in your head, hear the voice that these characters make. Are you ready? Okay, I'm going to put these up for you. Here is the first one. What do you think? Can you hear that voice in your head? All right. How about this one? It's a different voice, isn't it? Try to think about how the voice of that character is different from the first one that I showed you. Let's look at a third one. This is one of my favorites. How is that character's voice different from the other two characters that we saw? It's interesting, isn't it? How characters can have such very different voices. And what's even more interesting is that sometimes we have characters that are cartoon characters like the ones we saw, where they're voiced by the same person, but that same person is able to make their voice do various different things so that they can create different characters. And that's what we want to do, right? So now that we've got that idea of hearing that voice in our head, let's talk about how we create a character with our voice. Now, there are some different techniques that we use, and there are some different things that we think about. The first thing that we think about is, when we think about our voice and using that voice to create a character, is the tone of our voice. And the tone of our voice is kind of almost the musical quality of our voice. If you think about it like different notes on a scale, right? Some notes are high, some notes are low. And our voices can do that as well, right? Sometimes our voices can be up high, oh, hello. And sometimes they can be down low because we need a lower voice. We also think of our tone as being, sometimes it's nasal. That means, have you ever heard of somebody who talks through their nose and it sounds kind of like this? Yeah. Or throaty, so it's in their throat and you have that sort of sound that sounds like they're using their throat to talk. You have to be careful about doing that one too hard because you can hurt your throat. Or sometimes it sounds like all of their voice comes from their chest, and you have this sort of sound, right? So we have nasal, throaty, we have our chest voice, right? That deep booming chest voice that we can use. And then we have the high quality or the low quality of our voice. And all of that plays into the tone of our voice. Take a second right now and play around with some of those different tones. Nasal, throaty, high, low, chest, throat, nose. That's fun, isn't it? You can already start creating a lot of different voices just with those things. The next thing that we think about when we think about creating our character is, once we figure out kind of the tone that they use, we have to figure out the speed with which they speak. Some characters speak very slowly. Yes, I'm going to go down to the farm today and see if I can pick any more radishes. Slowly, right? And some characters speak very quickly. Oh, and then I went over to the store and I found everything that I could and I put it all into my shopping cart and got out as quickly as I could. It's funny, isn't it? How we can create such different characters just by changing the speed of our voice. So we have tone, we have our speed, we have what we call accent or dialect as well. And this is a fun one to try. So you might have people that speak with you might have somebody that's a cowpoke and he speaks with an accent like this. Or you might have someone who's very prim and proper and speaks with sort of an upper class accent like this. Yes, all kinds of different accents that you can use to create characters. What are some of the accents that you can think of? That's good. If you go anywhere in the United States, you'll hear people talking differently. And once you leave the United States, all around the world, people not only speak different languages, but they speak those languages in different dialects. So when you go from one part of a country to another part of a country, people speak differently. Listening to those things, and you can find videos on YouTube, you can listen to things online, but listening to those different things will get you used to making the sorts of sounds that they make, and you can use all of that in your characters. The next thing that we talk about when we talk about creating a character voice is the emotion. And yes, everyone's going to have emotions, and some of that's going to be in the script, right? So you're gonna read a script that's happy or a script that's sad. But just the character themselves, just by looking at some people, sometimes you get a sense of their emotion. And especially when we're voice acting or we're voicing characters, when you look at those characters, especially animated characters, they have a tendency to be drawn with a certain emotion built in. If you go back to some of those cartoon characters we looked at a little bit ago, you will look at them and you'll think, oh, well, I know that character is this kind of person, right? Maybe they're funny, or maybe they're very serious, right? So thinking about that emotion can change all of those things that we just talked about. Our tone, the speed of our voice, the accent, the dialect. If I have someone who's very serious, and very stern, then they're going to talk in my mind in a certain way, and they're going to use this sort of voice. And you can hear the speed that my voice is going at. It's sort of slow. I definitely have a lot of that sort of throaty voice in there, and I'm using a very straight speech in my dialect or in my diction, so that person is very proper, and they probably obey the rules a lot. Or if I'm gonna go someplace really fast and I'm gonna maybe play fast and loose and not obey the rules so much, I might have somebody who speaks a little bit more like this, a little bit quicker. He's got a little bit of that funny accent in him. You hear a little bit of that noise, that nose in the voice as well. That gives me an idea that maybe there's some mischief in there, and the voice becomes very different, right? Because of the emotion that we perceive in the character. Stop right now. What I want you to do is this exercise. Go ahead and try and say the same line. We'll use something like, hello, my name is, and you can fill in your name. Hello, my name is Andrew. I'm very happy to meet you. And I want you to do that in 5 different emotions. Can you think of 5 different emotions? I'll give you some examples. Happy, sad, angry. You can come up with the rest of your own. But I want you to stop and I want you to try and emote that line in 5 different ways right now. How did that work out for you? Was it easy or did you find it hard? It is so interesting, isn't it, how we can use just our voices without even looking at the faces of people. We can get so much emotion and so many interesting things. The last thing that I want to talk about before we start doing some of our own characters is our body posture. Now, when you're recording, when you're sitting like me, I usually like to, if I'm doing a character voice, I usually like to stand up because I like to have the full range of my body to act with, even though nobody can see me. But in this case, just because of the way that the scenario is set up here, I have to sit down. So if you have to sit down also, just make sure you're sitting with your back straight, not against the chair, and that your lungs have lots of room to get air into them. And then remember our lesson from last week, because the posture of our body, or the way that we use our body, will also change our voice. If I'm slouching down like this, I'm going to have a tendency. If I'm slouching down like this, I'm going to have a tendency to talk a certain way. But if I'm standing up very straight like this, I'm going to talk another way. And it changes everything. So act with your body as you're creating with your voice. Now, I'm going to show you another set of characters. And as I show you this set of characters, I want you to try to decide in your head first what the voice would sound like. And then I want you to pause this video and try and make the sound of that voice. And then after that, when you come back, we'll hear what I think that character might sound like. Are you ready? Okay, let's start. Now, remembering when we start that, we're thinking about the tone of our voice, the musical quality, nasal, throaty, chesty, right? The speed of our voice, fast or slow. The accent or dialect of our voice, the emotion that we convey through the character. Are you ready? Okay, here is the first one. What do you think that guy sounds like? Did you try it? Did you come up with something? Here, I'll show you what I think this guy sounds like.
Hey, you kids, get off my lawn. I don't want you coming around here anymore. Now, get out of this place. Get!
Did that sound like your grumpy old man? I love that character because he has a lot of emotion. It's a very easy one to do. Let's try another one. Ah, yes. What do you think this guy might sound like? All right, pause it and give it a try. All right. Here's what I think that character might sound like.
Well, you have come to see my finest piece of art. Welcome to my studio. I'm so happy to see you.
I love that French accent. It can be so silly. You can make it so exaggerated. And that's what we want to do, is we want to make sure that our characters are exaggerated in this particular case. Sometimes we want to sound more realistic, but these are cartoon characters, and so it's fine to be exaggerated. Let's try this next one. Ready? Ah, this is our friend from last week. Remember this guy? What do you think he might sound like? Go ahead and pause and let's find out. All right, here's my cartoon pirate.
Oh, ahoy there, mateys. It's good to see you. I'm glad you came to swab me decks. Now, it's about time you got below, you bilge rats.
Oh, pirates are fun voices to do also. The next, let's do some fantasy creatures, okay? How about this guy? What do you think this guy sounds like? Here's what I think he sounds like.
Well, hello there, everyone, and welcome to my studio. It's so good to see you today. Today we're going to be doing a lesson about magic.
That's the crazy wizard, right? Oh, but he has a cousin. That's this guy. What do you think this guy might sound like? Here's what I think he sounds like.
Well, I'll never let you get away with that. There's no way I'm going to be shown up by you. You've crossed me for the last time.
A little bit like our old man almost, right? There's some similar qualities, right? You can hear a lot of my throat in there, a little bit of my nose, sort of speaking very quickly. Yeah. How about another fantasy creature? How about this guy? This is our big ogre kind of fellow. What do you think he might sound like? Here's what I think.
Well, hello. Yes, I'm glad to see you today. Oh, don't worry about me. I just have to go over to the park and pull up some weeds and put some other things inside my nose and the sorts of things that I do. Don't worry about me.
I don't know. Whenever I see a big character like that, sometimes I think of that kind of slow talk.
And with this character, I like to give him a sort of an accent, just to make him sound a little bit, maybe like he's not quite so quick in the brain.
As compared to this guy right here. This is a goblin, right? And for me, when you have a smaller character, usually I take the pitch up, right? So my voice goes higher and sometimes goes faster as well. So,
Hey, look at me! No, don't look over there. Look over here. Yes, it's me. I'm the one you're looking at. Ha! Now, let's get away.
so you have that sort of very high voice, very nasal, very much in my nose, and that's how we create our goblin character. Did you have fun with that? I hope you did. I really did. So it's our assignment time for this week. Now, what I want you to do is I want you to take 5 characters, just like we did last week. Now, it could be the same 5 characters. You can work with those same 5 characters, or you can work with 5 completely different characters if you want. You make up a list of characters. You can use some of the characters that we looked at on screen today. And I want you to make a short recording in the voice of each of those characters. And then again, you can email those to me. The email address is going to be right here on the screen. And I would love to play some of those in a future session as well. Next week, we're going to start looking at scripts and how to deal with scripts, the anatomy of a script, if you've never used one before. And if you have, how we can take a script apart and use it to help us make our characters more interesting. I thank you so much for joining me today. I really look forward to seeing you again next week. Until we see each other again, stay safe, stay healthy, stay inside, and most importantly, stay creative. See you next time.